Welcome back to another episode of One QB to Rule Them All, the only Dynasty fantasy podcast that records only once a year and deals exclusively in one QB leagues, namely our home one QB league. I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Joe. How we doing today, Joe?
Good. We're good. We're good. I ran
I
my
see
first
this.
marathon this past weekend.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Ready to Had a lot of time to think about the draft, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, and they say the fantasy rookie draft is a lot like a marathon. You can't blow your wad right away in that first round. There's a lot of value in that later couple miles on those last two rounds. So let's see who ran a sprint this draft, and let's see who ran that marathon with you. So let's start off with just the 101. We've got Everett. He started off with Marvin Harrison Jr. With the 101, then got Lad McConkey with the 109, then Jaden Daniels over at the 111, Luke McCaffrey in the first pick of the third round, and ended off his draft with Jatavion Sanders with the 402. What did you think of this draft? What do you think the best pick was, the worst pick, and what are you looking forward to most about this draft class?
Yeah, overall, I think that after Marvin Harrison Jr. was picked, you could say that Everett knocked it out of the park. Um, I think that although I will say I don't think that that was necessarily his best pick. It was an easy pick to make. I think we all probably would have picked the same. I'm actually thinking that the Lad McConkey pick was actually the best pick here, and not necessarily because of the player, but because of the discipline. Everett was staring down the second highest tight end in terms of value at that point, but his team is uniquely situated where that tight end is completely useless to him. It's worthless to him. It makes no sense on his team, and he had an absolute stud of a wide receiver staring him in the face, and he chose the wide receiver. So he ate his veggies. He made the right pick, and I think that was the best pick that he made. Um, Outside of that, I think that now on the flip side, I think that the worst pick he made was Luke McCaffrey. I felt like there were way, but there were. I feel like you could argue that the three wide receivers taken directly out of him were tiers above Luke McCaffrey. I don't need to get too deep into that one. I love Javon Baker. I love Jermaine Burton. So I would have taken either of those guys before him. Um, but then I had a tough time with the most intriguing prospect. I ended up just going for the low hanging fruit, and I said Marvin Harrison Jr. Um, we're just going to have to see how great he is. His value is already sky high. Um, his situation is great, being attached to Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense and really nobody around him. Um, so it'll just be I'll be interested to see, is he a 1100-yard type of guy? Is he a 1700-yard type of guy? We're just gonna have to let that one play out. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Everett's draft.
So I'm going to start with just disagreeing with you out the gate. You said the best pick was Lad McConkey. I think that was his worst pick. Um, there were higher drafted receivers on the board, and this seems like it's a draft pick based on situation, liking the Lad McConkey situation, no competition in that offense. But the Harbaugh offense, especially coming from the offensive coordinator coming from the Ravens, not really a pass heavy offense. So I don't even think that the situation is necessarily that much better for Lad McConkey than it is with the Xavier Legette's or Ricky Purcell, not necessarily going to produce right away. But once some of those targets vacate that offense, I think Ricky Pearsall has a more insulated value than Lad McConkey. I think we could be looking at Lad McConkey being, 60% of his value this time next year. Marvin Harrison Jr. was by far my favorite pick. Obviously, it's just a no-brainer in a one QB league. You get that stud. Um, a sneaky worst part of this draft is in a team where you have CeeDee Lamb and how he performed last year, and you still ended up earning the 101. I would like to come away from this draft with a lot more pieces. He did get Marvin Harrison Jr. But outside of that, he doesn't get many for sure starters or guys that have high upside. Um, and then I think the most intriguing pick is the Jaden Daniels pick. I think he's one of the more insulated pieces with that rushing upside. He's going to keep that value, especially with a team that doesn't look like it's ready to compete just yet. Being able to have that QB room kind of locked up and have that value insulated as he, probably tanks for another year. I think that's a very intriguing pick, and I think that's one that could age very well. But without further ado, let's move into your draft, which is by far my favorite draft. Starting off with Malik Neighbors at the 102, then you get Brock Bowers all the way at the 110, which is insane value, and then you follow that up with back-to-back first-round actual NFL wide receivers and Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Legette. Then you get Marshawn Lloyd, who, if you look at that the Josh Jacobs contract, they have an out after 1 year. So Marshawn Lloyd could get some starting time right away. Bucky Irving in the third round with the eighth pick. Isaac Garenda with the last pick in the third round. And then you rounded out in the fifth round, 502 with Dylan Laub. Overall, just love this draft. I think the best pick is easy. It's obviously Brock Bowers. Getting him at the 110 is just insane value. Yeah, the offensive situation is not necessarily the greatest, but you just get one of those stud guys that really could have a positional advantage for 10 plus years. And that's not really an exaggeration. There's a reason why these high end tight ends are valuable on your team. To get that at the 110 is just insane. The worst pick, if I'm going all the way down to your fifth pick, in the third and getting it in the third round for a pick I don't necessarily love in Bucky Irving, I think you really smashed the draft. Bucky Irving, his tape really screamed that he's an athletic wonder. Like he broke away big runs in college, but his athletic testing says that he's not really that much of an athlete. So I'm not a big fan of him as a prospect. But you know, um, just not in love with that pick. I really liked Vidal and his opportunity in his first year. I like Garendo, who you ended up going with four picks later over him. If you're looking at running back, I'm not a huge fan of Will Shipley, so I'm glad you didn't take him over Bucky Irvin. But if that's what the nitpick is on this draft, you really smashed it. And then looking forward to the most, I'm looking forward to these Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Legette picks and how it shapes our fantasy landscape in the future. I don't think after this year we're really going to see first round wide receivers slip into the second round of the rookie draft. I think people are going to see how these wide receivers insulate in value. They don't really go down. Even look at Jackson Smith and Jigba. Unless you really have a you know world like world altering horrible rookie season like a Quentin Johnson, you don't lose that much value in terms of keep trade cut points as long as you're a first round wide receiver. So I think those two picks are really going to shape the way that other people in this league draft in the future. And I'm really looking forward to it. What did you think of your draft?
Yeah, I agree. Rose has to be Brock Bowers. I said one man's trash is another man's treasure. Um, Not counting the elite three receivers, six teams passed on him. Obviously, staking their flags in the ground that they have a better tight end situation than Brock Bowers will provide, which I have a hard time agreeing with this. But yeah, I'm super stoked on that. That's the pick that makes me go to sleep feeling good every night. Um, then my thorn, I went with one of my third round running backs, but I actually went with the other one. I went with Garendo. I don't think he's a good football player. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cody Schrader is actually the rookie Niners running back that turns out. I think that dude's a dog, and he put up some numbers. Let me just say that in his time in Columbia. And then yeah, I kind of agreed with you semi on the Bud, but I just said Xavier Legette. Uh, I said I have no idea if he's Jonathan Mingo or DK Metcalf, and I'm a little terrified to find out. I'm not. I don't think I'm. I think that there are certainly valid reasons why these like Pearsall and Legette fell to the second round. I don't fault any of the the teams for not nabbing these guys in the first, but yeah, I think Leggett will be an interesting player to see play out. But you're right, like, but I agree that I look forward to the value installation in the event that Pearsall never sees the field as a rookie, and Leggett, still needs to figure out how to run a route.
All right. So let's move on to probably the most active trader for picks pre-draft. Not a lot of trades happening within the draft for Nate, but as you can see, not a lot of picking at his own spot there. Starting off with Rome Odunze at the 103, then moving to Caleb Williams at the 106, Jonathan Brooks at the 107, Keon Coleman at the 108, Trey Benson at the 112, then Malachi Corley at the 212, and finally with the 5-7 getting, I've got the first name Tip Raymond out of Illinois, whoever the hell that is with the 5-7. I'll just go into it. My favorite pick that Nate had was the Malachi Corley pick. I think he's going to be a weapon in that offense. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, you see a lot of times the weapon of the offense doesn't necessarily result in fantasy points, but there are a lot of comps to Debo with Malachi Corley. So it could end up going really well. And I think at the 212, that's a lot of good value, especially with Braylon Allen and Troy Franklin going right before him. I think getting Malachi Corley, who I had as a much higher tier player than those two prospects. My least favorite pick was the Keon Coleman pick. I just didn't see him as much of a separator in college, which if you're not able to separate in college level, I don't see you being that much of a separator in the pros. But that's an offense with a lot of vacated targets, and he could absolutely boom. Just not a massive fan of that. And then the most interesting, what I'm looking forward to, is how Caleb Williams develops. I think he's going to be a stud, but he could be one of those players where it doesn't. He might see on field success, but it doesn't really translate to the fantasy football point scoring, and it could be one of those things that really drastically changes the way that our league values quarterbacks, which is already fairly low even for a one QB league. If we see that Caleb Williams doesn't really result in fantasy football points, we could see that these quarterbacks become even less valued in our league. But what were your thoughts on Nate's draft?
Uh, yeah, I think all in all, I kind of saw it the same way. You know, I it was difficult for me to come out with a favorite, and I ended up just saying that Rome Odunze was my favorite. Uh, the alliteration was just too good, Rosie Rome. Um, Maybe Nate should change his nickname to that, but um, he comes in, he joins a talented but very aged, or I should say, or aging at best, aged at worst, wide receiver room, and I think I think he's going to jump right to the top and be Caleb's number one weapon sooner than people might think. Right, may not happen this year, but I think it's kind of a self fulfilling prophecy, if you will. It's just got to happen. Yeah, definitely worst pick was Keon Coleman with arguably the best tight end prospect of all time staring him dead in the face, and B, arguably a better wide receiver prospect with less target competition still available. And even then, you could even say, there were two first round wide receivers that he picked up that were ignored there. And then my bud, actually, I wanted to do I thought it was very intriguing that Nate came away with both running backs. I've basically decided that there are only two running backs in this entire class, and everything else is just a crapshoot. But that's my own opinion. But I decided that Trey Benson was more intriguing of the two, just because Jonathan Brooks kind of he jumps into a good situation, but it's kind of boring. We kind of know that the job is Jonathan Brooks's as soon as his ACL is all good. But Benson, it's kind of like, is he a fancy Is he a fancy handcuff a la Condre Miller, or is he, an explosive starting running back on a decent offense like Kenny Walker? I think I think it's going to be interesting to see where Trey Denson's value ends up settling out. And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And let's move from one of the more active traders to by far the least active trader. The least surprising thing in this league is that Tate is picking with all five of his picks. Did not trade a single one, did not trade for any other pick. We got at the 104, we got Xavier Worthy. At the 204, we got Blake Corum. 304, we got McMillan, Jalen. 404, we got Jacob Cowing. And 5-4, we've got Tariq Owens, and he cut him immediately after the draft. So we could kind of ignore that pick. What did you think the best was, worst was, and what are you looking forward to the most?
Uh, the best, I had no idea what to do with this one. I just said Jacob Cowing because I kind of thought he was a fun little sleeper going into the draft. That's what I put down. But more seriously, I thought Xavier Worthy is kind of the most intriguing of these picks. Um, I thought that Tate picking there immediately made this draft exponentially more exciting than I thought it would be. And just that alone makes it a very intriguing pick. Um, yeah, it just kind of feels like a pick that we'll be looking back on that either made or broke Tate's team. Um, and the Thorn, I could have picked. I guess I could have picked other ones, but I picked Jalen McMillan. I don't hate Jaden McMillan. I think he's fine. He's in kind of a lousy situation. He's just in a crowded area, and I felt like it was just a reach in the early third. But yeah,
Yeah, we really went similar with this. I completely agree that the uh worthy pick set the tone for the draft. It definitely was the first eyebrow raised in this draft, and it happened early. That I put it as my worst pick. I don't believe in him that well as that much as a prospect, but with the Rashee Rice news keep getting worse, it might turn out to be a very good pick. There's just a lot of competition for that role in this offense, especially when you know that the top target getter is going to be the tight end in this position or in this offense. Not really in love with drafting Xavier Worthy this early. My best pick, I had McMillan. I really liked him as a prospect. He really showed out in his junior year. Had a less than stellar senior year with a lot of target competition in that offense. But it can really work well out of the slot. I do like him as a prospect. And then Cowing was one of the guys that I really liked as a later round pick. One of my target go get guys. Very much a crowded offense, but I can see him being valuable in a couple of years. Definitely not some guy who's going to be putting up points on your fantasy roster right now, but definitely a taxi squad candidate to just let him gain in value as time goes on. But that wraps up our discussion of Tate's team. Let's get on to Ryan Henning. He drafted Brian Thomas Jr. at the 105, Drake May at the 205. He had Javon Baker at the 3-3, Audric Estime at the 3-5, Tez Walker with the 4-1, Brendan Rice at the 4-3, Malik Washington at the 4-5. Is it Cade Stover out of Ohio State at the 5-5, and he ended up with, is it Isaiah Davis?
yeah, I think
Isaiah
so.
Davis at the 5-6. What did you think about this draft class?
I think a lot of picks. I didn't even like when I was doing my little write up. I wasn't even really thinking about all nine of these picks that were taken by Ryan. You know, I getting right to it. I mean, I had his best pick as Javon Baker for me. I personally think that Javon Baker's a stud. I like him in that Patriots office just as much as the other two guys, Pop Douglas and Jalen Polk. I think any of those three guys. I know they got. I mean, what's it? Kendrick Bourne's there still, so it's a little bit of a crowded room, but he'll go soon. And then I think of those three, Javon Baker has as good a shot as any of them to take that number one role, attached to an interesting rookie QB who's also on this team. Um, Thorne, worst pick, I gotta say. I think that the real Nepo King was on this team of the draft. There were a few of those, but Brendan Rice, I don't, I don't see anything with that. I never really, I did a lot. I looked into Brendan Rice. I tried to like it, but I don't think there's anything there. Um, Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. And then most intriguing, you gotta be intrigued by Brian Thomas. Athletic freak. He put up the numbers you want him to put up on a very with with elite competition. He had neighbors right alongside him. So I think the upside is there. I think that there's certainly downside, which and so that volatility makes him very intriguing and an interesting player to keep track of.
Yeah, I agree with you on the best pick. I think Baker, he has every potential to be the guy in a not decided situation, but a situation that's definitely improving. You got the Drake May Baker stack. Really like that pick getting in the third round. It feels like you're kind of getting the same value as Polk, who went at the 2-6, but you're getting it almost a full round later. My least favorite pick is Audric Estime. I don't think he's good at football. He's just a bruiser, and I don't really remember a successful bruiser in a Sean Payton offense. Um, it's always been, and he's not a great pass catcher. It's always been, you know, your pass catchers that are the running back you want in a Sean Payton offense. And I don't think Audric Estime is that guy. And he's in a crowded backfield of two guys who we think can produce and has elite dynasty value, and one guy who we've seen produce or not Jordan McLaughlin, but McLaughlin last year produce. I think it's just too crowded of a backfield and not really the prospect that I like. And then looking forward to Malik Washington. He might be the only wide receiver handcuff of all time. He's speedy in that Miami offense. And if either of the two main guys go down in that offense, I think that Malik Washington can step up and be startable in certain weeks. Very interesting in how that pick plays out. But yeah, like you said, 9 picks in this draft. I liked some of them. I didn't like a lot of them. Let's move on to the next one, which is my draft class. What are your thoughts on how I did? We started with Jalen Wright at the 2-7, then JJ McCarthy at the 3-6, Ben Sinnott at the 3-9, Johnny Wilson at the 4-9, and then Frank Gore Jr. at the 5-9. What are your thoughts on my draft class?
Oh man, I look forward to seeing Johnny Wilson. You the 6'7" wide receiver who actually can play wide receiver. You can't help but be a fan of that. I really wanted to draft Johnny Wilson. I'm not gonna lie. If he was there for me at the in the fifth, I would have felt great about snagging him there. But yeah, he's very intriguing. He's a massive outlier. Exactly the type of player you'd want to burn a fourth round pick on. Type of wide receiver. Um, but I said that the worst pick was JJ McCarthy. Just a straight up roster clogger at the least. We've already talked about how it's the least liquid. I don't know if it's the most devalued, but it's certainly the least liquid position in our league. And you already have two, probably three QBs better than him. So it's kind of like, just raw value injected onto your team for no purpose. But I did love Ben Sinnott. I love that pick. I think that this is both a value and production play. I think that he's a name that's gonna get hyped up quite a bit over the summer. Probably to the point where his value and Jahan Dotson's value intersect, and potentially Ben Sinnott goes ahead of him, just because Jahan Dotson's a little bit of a tired name at this point. I'm not really concerned about Zach Ertz. He's old. He wasn't even he was drawing targets in Arizona this past year, but he got hurt right away and he wasn't actually that productive. So yeah, love the Ben Sinnott pick. And yeah.
Yeah, I disagree with you on the McCarthy take. I think he's bad at football. I think he is most likely Zach Wilson 2.0 as a Vikings fan. I really hate the pick for the Vikings, but at the 3-6, I put it as my best pick. I think that value is very much insulated. He does have rushing upside. He has the ability to throw on the run, and he does get downfield with his legs. Sneaky athletic guy. So I do think that there is that upside as a quarterback, and I would probably will not be able to move off JJ McCarthy for value, but it gives me the opportunity to move off of Lamar Jackson uh, and capitalize on his value if JJ McCarthy does take off. So I just think at the 3-6, that kind of value, the a top 10 drafted quarterback, it's just part of that value insulation that I really try and draft towards, as you can see by the JJ McCarthy and Benson not pick. They're not fits on my roster in terms of needs, but they are the most valuable player at that pick. Um, and just have a very clear path to gaining value and staying keeping their value uh, in most of the outcomes. I have my worst pick as the Jalen Wright. I fell in love with him. He's just such an easy start sit guy early on in his career. If one of the two backs there is injured, which happens quite a bit in that Miami backfield, he feels like he's a guy who you can start in those weeks and then you sit him every other week. Just a very easy start sit guy. I really love that value there. But uh, at the 2-7, you're looking for more of a guy who's going to start more weeks than not and doesn't need to rely on an injury. So that's just a case of a prospect that I fell in love with early, that I didn't really get the value for where I was picking. And then the most intriguing guy, I put Benson out there. There's a good to fair chance that he is asked to block a lot more um, in that Washington offense, which is not great for his fantasy value, but he could be one of those guys who does blow up in that second, third, fourth year. It's just whether or not he stays on my roster for that time to get that value raise later in his career. But overall, not in love with this draft. There were a lot of guys that I really, really wanted to get that were not there or were not values at where I was picking. So not in love with this draft class, but we move on to the next. Let's move on to Matt Brown, probably our savviest drafter based on last year's draft. He starts with Roman Wilson in the 2-9, then gets Jermaine Burton at the 3-2, Ray Davis at the 3-7, Kamani Vidal at the 3-11, and then Rasheen Ali at the 5-3. What were your favorite picks here? Worst pick, and what were you most excited about?
Yeah, definitely kind of a tricky one to assign to just it was kind of it's a difficult evaluation, and that's a good thing. I think that there were uh, there were reasons to like every pick. Um, I think that the most intriguing pick is Jermaine Burton. I think the talent, the draft capital, the landing spot are all there. Um, I think it probably yields the highest upside of any pick in the third round. Um, I think that my least favorite pick, and it's if it's your and like you said earlier, if it's a late round pick, then you probably had a good draft. My least favorite pick was Rasheen Ali, and not necessarily for the player, but I feel like Matt kind of handicapped himself a little bit. So he traded 55, I think, to trade up into this spot. And it seems like a weird move considering that's always been sort of an advantage that Matt Brown has been able to capitalize on is the fab dollars. And so I feel like maybe that was a little bit of a cutesy type move, and maybe Rasheen Ali, he could have still been there at the 5-7. I don't know. Uh, but that was my least favorite pick. Not really, um, you know, kind of nitpicking there. My favorite pick though goes to Ray Davis. Going into the draft, I thought that Ray Davis had as good a shot as anyone as just being a running back that sticks around in the league like a Zach Moss. And he goes right into a good situation in Buffalo. And yeah, I think that it's kind of hard to see that pick backfiring on him.
Yeah, I agree with Burton. You had him as the most intriguing. I am as the best pick. He has such a clear path to targets and value and that value raised from the third round pick. With T. Higgins questionable on his future with the Bengals, really good offense that you want to have at least a piece in. I really like that pick at the 3-2. Worst pick, Roman Wilson. I watched a lot of JJ McCarthy tape as a Vikings fan, and I don't necessarily believe he's that good of a separator. It didn't he's very much a slot specialist, which we've seen in that Pittsburgh offense is valuable. But with Matt Canada gone, do we even know if that slot wide receiver has value still in the Pittsburgh offense? So I thought that was kind of a reach at the 2-9. And then most intriguing, I really like the Davis and Vidal pick for both of them. I think that's great value. I think they have very, very high touchdown upside, um, both of them, and they both could take on larger workloads based on production the preseason. And if there's any injuries in front of them, they're very startable fantasy assets. So I really like those two picks. And I think Matt had a very solid draft. On to the next. This is going to be the shortest one by far. We've got two picks for Jake. We got the 4-8, Michael Penix, and then Lewis Reese Zamet, running back, who apparently played rugby. That's what I've got in my notes. What pick did you like? What pick did you not like?
Well, I'm gonna keep this. Well, I have no comment for the rugby player. I really, I didn't, I don't know how to interpret rugby film. Um, Nor do I feel the need to spend time uh, trying to correlate rugby skills to football skills. So my rose, bud, and thorn for Jake's team are all going to be Michael Penix. Um, I said I'm not going to lie. Oh, he picked up Sion Vaki off of waivers, so we might want to talk about him too. But I just said I don't fucking know shit about Sion Vaki or rugby for that matter. So my rose, thorn, and stem are all Michael Penix. Rose because of the value, thorn because it felt like an awkward process play for a team holding Justin Herbert and Dak, and Bud because I fucking love that the Falcons were in a position to command the entire draft and absolutely pissed away and absolutely found a way to piss it away. So yeah, everything
Yeah,
Michael.
I've got the best pick as Michael Penix. Clearly just a taxi squad guy for the first 2 years, and maybe he's a very good starting quarterback in fantasy in a couple of years. So set it and forget it. Leave him on your taxi squad. Never really need to worry about it whatsoever. Worst pick is this Reese Zamet guy. No idea why. And the Vadi pickup, is it Vadi? Was entirely because I was talking about him post draft, not knowing that we didn't have waivers because I was gonna try and make room for him. He was drafted in the third round as a running back. He played running back and safety in college, and they announced him as a running back, which would make it insane value to get him up on the waiver wire, a third round running back. But he will most likely just be a special teamer, so just one of those guys that hold on your roster and see how they use him. So that not a bad pickup there. We can move on to our next guy. That is Brad. He ended up with Adonai Mitchell at the 2-1, Polk at the 2-6, and Jamari Thrash out on the 4-10. What did you like here? What didn't you like?
Yeah. Where are my notes? All right. Well, I know that, and this is a hot take. I think that you're probably going to disagree. I think a lot of people are going to disagree, but I think Adonai Mitchell was the worst pick of these three. Um, Quite frankly, he was a decoy in college. And I think I think he's just landed himself in the same exact spot as he was in college, um, where he's going to be running routes and he's going to be doing it lackadaisically because he doesn't give a fuck if he knows he's not getting the ball. But with that being said, I said that Adonai Mitchell is also the most intriguing pick, because the talent, the athleticism's there. It's undeniable. Um, he's he's interesting. He's obviously interesting to me as the guy that has Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. So I'm definitely going to be paying attention. But yeah, I he wasn't for me, Adonai Mitchell. It made my pick my 202 and 203 picks pretty easy. After AD was gone. But then I just said I know I talked about Javon Baker earlier as my favorite, as a guy who could be a top dog in New England. I think I think the same applies here to Jalen Polk. So he's got just as good a shot as anyone. So I decided this is my favorite pick. Was Jalen Polk there at the 206.
Yeah, we're in lockstep here. The best pick I had was Polk as well. Like we talked about earlier, it's an offense in which the targets are up for grabs. No one's earned them yet, and he's got as good a chance as anyone to earn them. I agree. Worst pick was Adonai Mitchell. One of my favorite prospects, probably my favorite prospects out of the top three wide receivers. Um, Pre-draft, but he just didn't get the draft capital. So the NFL teams don't really believe in him as much as the fantasy community does. So at the 2-1, I don't believe that he got him at value. Just not great. And then looking forward to the most, Adonai Mitchell again. I think he's a talented player, and we'll see what kind of role he carves up. Not the best offense to have a pass catcher in with the top dog kind of locked up and a run heavy offense, but I think Adonai Mitchell does have the talent to justify the value of this pick in the future. So I've got him as the worst pick and the prospect I'm looking most forward to, similar to you, and then Polk as the best pick. Let's move on to Jack. He started off at the 210 with Braylon Allen, 310 Will Shipley, and then 510 Cody Schrader out of Missouri. So I'll let you talk about Cody Schrader because I know nothing about him. He was not on my draft board. He was not on my must watch. But as a Mizzou fan, I'm sure you've got uh, you've got the lowdown on him. But I'll just run through. I have best pick NA. I did not like a single pick here. I don't know who Cody Schrader is. I don't like Will Shipley as a prospect, especially as a pass catching back in an offense with a quarterback who never throws to the running back. Just not a fan of that. But I think the worst pick in the entire draft was Braylon Allen at the 210. Very crowded backfield. They've got four day two or better running backs on that depth chart. Not really sure what kind of path Braylon Allen does have to getting on the field. Just a head scratcher at the 210. I think there were a lot of talented guys still on the board there. And then what I'm looking most forward to, NA again. I don't know anything about these guys, and I don't believe in them as prospects. This episode of One QB to Rule Them All is brought to you by Ev's Sweet Cheeks. Ev's Sweet Cheeks. Cheeks so sweet, you'll get a cavity. Thank you very much to our sponsor, and back to the draft breakdown. Thank you very much for our sponsors, and let's get into what Joe thinks about Jack's draft. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I was nice and said Will Shipley was the most intriguing. At one point coming out of high school, he was heralded. He was compared to CMC, depending on who you talk to. Obviously, he's not that, um, but he brings some speed to Philly. Maybe they can unlock something there, and so that that that's a little bit intriguing to me. Um, Worst pick, Braylon Allen. Um, just an absolutely brutal use of a pick. Um, yeah, like you said, he's buried on the depth chart. He wasn't even the only right. They drafted Isaiah Davis too. Um, Yeah. Yeah. But then get into the highlight of this draft.
I knew
Um,
you'd have an opinion.
so the Rose, Cody Schrader. Let's talk about Cody Schrader. So Cody Schrader, out of high school. So there's a whole story to Cody Schrader. He's a guy you're going to want to root for. So buckle up. So he coming out of high school had no offers anywhere. So he goes to Truman State Division two in somewhere in bumfuck BFE Missouri. Um, Leads D2 in yards from scrimmage, has like 2,000 something yards. Um, Transfers to Mizzou. Doesn't even not even as a an athletic he walks on the Mizzou. He transfers to Mizzou so he can walk on the team. He's buried on the depth chart at Mizzou. Um, then his junior year, so not this past year, but the year before, he finally cracked the rotation, and we had this absolute shit running back, Nate Pete, who he was competing with for targets, and it was obvious that Cody Schrader was an absolute dog. Um, but they still didn't give him the ball. So he's a junior and he has a shitty junior. He's in a split backfield as a junior. Everybody's begging Drinkwitz and all of them to give him more run. And he finally gets his run as a senior this past year, and he like fucking blew up the SEC. I mean, I think against Tennessee he had like 300 yards from scrimmage. Um, he he can catch passes. He he's insanely quick at like. I mean, his RAS score is not going to blow you out of the water, but he's elusive. He's a lot. I mean, he's Blake Corum, but in the fifth round, and I I'm kind of like I kind of feel like he's probably way better than Isaac Garendo, and like this could be like a Trey Sermon, Elijah Mitchell situation, on the Niners. But don't sleep on Cody Schrader, man. He had a he's going to work his way onto an NFL roster, I think.
All right. So Jack there had a good pick. You had worst pick as Allen, and did you have a looking forward to, or is Cody Schrader also that for you? Oh, you had Will Shipley.
Yeah, so yeah.
All right. Let's move on to Matt Henning. He started off with the 211 with Troy Franklin. Then at the 4-6, getting Theo Johnson, 4-11, Spencer Rattler, 5-1, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and at the 5-11, he got Jaheim Bell out of FSU. What are your thoughts here? What was your favorite, least favorite, and what are you looking forward to?
Maybe just for fun, I'll start with my favorite. My favorite pick was Tyrone Tracy. Um, Fucking hated getting sniped there. I thought for sure I was going to get him at the 502,
Mm.
but it's cool. I was cool taking Lobby there. Um, he he maybe overpay like Matt Brown's probably like punching air right now, being like, "Well, he traded up for this pick," and you say, like, "Oh, I traded up," but did he overpay? Yeah, but was Tyrone Tracy by far the best player available? By far, yes. Um, and it just left a very sour taste in my mouth. So that means it was probably a really good pick. Um, then I said like the worst part of this draft was like burning the two fourths that he had on a QB and a tight end. Um, I don't know if there's anything wrong with Theo Johnson or Spencer Rattler. Rattler's behind Derek Carr, who's not a world beater by any means, and Theo Johnson, I think, is like pretty athletic or something.
Just a tinge athletic.
Yeah, he's like the most. Is he like the most athletic tight
Yeah,
end
he had a
prospect?
9.9 RAS score. He has the highest RAS score of all time.
Yeah.
I think by any position. Um, but for sure for tight end.
So you like that pick?
Yeah, it's my well, did you have your worst pick was those two? And then what was your most
And
excited
then
for?
And then the most intriguing pick I feel like was Troy Franklin. I mean, my heart tells me that this guy's a monster prospect that you get at the 211. Um, but my head's like, he's a fourth round receiver. He's got no shot at doing anything. So we'll see how that one plays out.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. It's not that I'm most excited. It is the worst pick on my book. This is a prospect that again the fantasy uh the fantasy world pre-draft believed in, but the NFL does not believe in, even more so than Adonai Mitchell. Um, fourth round pick, wide receiver, in an offense that's led by Bo Nix. Obviously, Troy Franklin was productive in an offense led by Bo Nix, but I just don't believe in him anymore now that the NFL has told us they don't believe in him. Completely agree on Tyrone Tracy Jr. Just an absolute stud. When you're looking at these late rookie wide or running backs, two things end up raising their value: pass catching ability and a path to snaps. We're talking about an offense that has no solidified running back, so there's a path to snaps there. And this guy played wide receiver for 4 years, I want to say. So he's a 25-year-old rookie running back, but he has that path to fantasy relevance. I traded to try and get a fifth round pick because I've had him identified for a month and a half now as a must get, and he was always going in the fifth round up until we started drafting. A week after the draft, everyone was aware of Tyrone Tracy Jr. Just a guy you really want to have on the end of your roster because he could just be that guy. Really, really, really love that pick. He was up there for one of my favorite picks, or for my favorite pick in the draft. And then most looking forward to is Theo Johnson. This is a position where outside of last year, rookie tight ends don't produce, so it's not expected for him to get on this roster and produce. It's a tough position to learn, and it's a tough position to get on the field for. Theo Johnson has every athletic tool to produce and to get on the field. It's just whether or not he's good at football, and we don't know that yet. He wasn't very productive at Penn State, but Penn State is we'll call it the fake tight end U, because tight end U is definitely Iowa, but he's a guy from a prestigious program that has produced a lot of good tight ends, and just an athletic freak. I'm excited to see, does he learn how to play football, because he has the athletic tools to play football. Will he get there? He's just a guy who's going to be on that taxi squad probably for a couple years before he gets on the field, and we see whether or not that value pays off. But I'm really intrigued by that pick. Let's round it off with Fear That Freak Edworthy. He started with Bo Nix at the 4-7, trading up to get there. Then he gets Eric All out of Iowa, the real tight end university for the Cincinnati Bengals. And then with the 5-12, he took Moose Mohammed and then cut him immediately. So what do you like about this draft? What don't you like? Not a lot of assets to play with here. What do you think about Tyler's draft?
Yeah, I just kind of copy and pasted my comments for Jake, and changed a few names around. Um, I don't fucking know shit about Eric All. I don't care that he went to Iowa. Um, Sorry, I don't know. So my Rose, Stem, and Thorn are all Bo Nix. Uh, Rose because of value. Again, same with Thorn because it just felt like an awkward. Again, it was an awkward process play. He's got Jalen Hurts, um, and I'm looking forward to seeing it play out because I also I heard that like the Broncos were the only team that had even a starter grade on Bo Nix. Every other NFL team viewed him as a backup quarterback. So that tells me that Sean Payton, he's either a genius or a total fucking idiot.
Yeah, I have Nix as the best pick, not because I believe in Nix as a prospect in terms of long-term future, but I do believe that there is within the range of outcomes that Bo Nix is the second most productive rookie quarterback this year. Sean Payton offense, old quarterback, going to learn the system probably fairly quickly. And Sean Payton's offense historically is a offense that you want the quarterback in. So he could show out this year, similar to like a Mac Jones in that draft class. He was, if not the most productive, top two most productive in his rookie year. Sure, we learned after a couple years that he's not good at football, but after that first year, he definitely raised in value. So this could be one of those short-term rentals. See how he performs in that first year and see if you can flip him for a future third. Because at no chance were you able to trade this pick, the 4-7, for next year's third. But at this time next year, you might be able to flip Bo Nix for a third. So I like that pick. Worst pick, I said NA, just because there aren't enough picks here and at enough value to really be disappointed in a pick. I don't love any of the prospects that he ended up with, but just not enough, not applicable to have a worse pick when your first pick is the 4-7. And then looking most forward to all, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't know a thing about him, but a tight end out of Iowa. I mean, you got Laporta, Kittle, Fant. Are all of the good tight ends out of Iowa? Are there any? I guess Kelsey out of Cincinnati, but like, Hawkinson. All of the good tight ends are out of Iowa. Maybe this is just the next one in an offense that you want to piece in. Maybe this is a great pick. Maybe we just don't know. And Moose Muhammad is a non-factor because he was the last pick in the draft and he immediately hit waivers. So, um, yeah, Eric All, I guess maybe he's something. So let's click off here and let's go through who was your favorite pick of the draft? What was the worst pick in the draft in your opinion? And what are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah. Going all the way back to one where you disagreed with me, I thought that the best, and I wanted, I wanted my pick for the best pick in the draft to be one that was actually impactful, not necessarily just nabbing some value at cost for a player that won't really actually ever be a difference maker. Um, so with that being said, I thought that the best pick of the draft was Lad McConkey. Um, I think that the wide receivers on the Chargers are honestly terrible. Like I don't think Josh Palmer is anything, and Quentin Johnson is less than that. Um, he's attached to a solid QB. Um, I, yeah, I think that and going back to just the discipline to not take Bowers, I was like, I don't know if you heard me in the background, but I was like trying to pressure Everett to take Bowers, um, kind of like reverse psychology. Like I would have been happy taking Bowers or Ladd, but I knew that like if he took Bowers, it'd kind of be a weird pick for his team, considering he already has the tight end one. So yeah, like the discipline and the awareness of his roster, I was impressed with just the ability to make that pick. But then with that being said, I think that like I go back to like the most interesting pick to me is going to be Troy Franklin because I genuinely thought he was like, when I started doing my dynasty research, he was like he was going off as like the 105. Like he was like either going to be he was at worst like an early second round pick. Like he was and and so it was just like kind of baffling to me to see him drop to the fourth round. Um, so that's just kind of an inherently interesting pick to me. And then I feel like this is the one that we're most likely to agree on. But I think that the worst pick of the entire draft was Braylon Allen.
100% agree.
So
Yeah. I think we already talked on the Braylon Allen front that it just head scratcher. Not there really does not seem to be a path outside of several injuries for him to be fantasy relevant in the near future. Um, I completely agree that that was my worst pick as well. I'm close to you on the best pick. It's not because I'm close on Lad McConkey. It's because the next pick after that, your pick of Brock Bowers, absolutely my favorite pick of the draft. Getting him at
it
the
was
110. I think you can mock draft this 1,000 times and you're not going to get Brock Bowers to fall at the 110. Like you needed
yeah,
everything to go. very special for you. I mean, Nate drafted back to back to back, the 106 through the 108, and he passed on Brock Bowers every single time. And then you needed literally the only person who could pass on Brock Bowers at the 109 drafting in front of you, the guy who had Sam Laporta. Just an insane value there at 110. Love that pick. And then looking forward to the most, Tyron Tracy Jr. I can't talk up enough about him. When he got picked at the 501, there were like 4 or 5 people who were upset. You drafting at the 452. I know Matt Brown had Tyron Tracy Jr. as a try and get. I was absolutely going to try and move up with Fab Dollars in the 5-9 to try and get him if he didn't go with the 5-1. Just a really, really savvy pick by Matt Henning there. Really, really love that pick. Do you have a best overall draft, worst overall draft, and a most intriguing draft prepared, or do you want me to just run through the ones that I picked?
Oh, you
Here,
can
I'll
just.
give you a
All
minute. I'll go through mine
right.
as you can look through these classes and come up with yours. Best overall draft. I think you know where I'm going with this. You ended up with 3 first round wide receivers, but only and the tight end one, and you only had 2 first round picks, if I'm reading this correctly. 2 first round picks, and you still ended up with 3 first round wide receivers in the NFL draft and the tight end one, possibly the tight end prospect one of all time. Just impeccable draft. Really, really love it. Uh, Jack's catching a lot of strays here. I mean, they're not really strays. We're evaluating the draft class, but this draft class is borderline inexcusable. Three running backs who just I don't see a path to fantasy relevance. Really, really not enjoying the draft that Jack put together. And then my most intriguing by far is Nate. The Roma Dunze pick is pretty chalk, but the Caleb, Jonathan Brooks, and Keon Coleman pick, as well as that Trey Benson, uh, he had 5 first round picks, and I don't think any of us would have guessed that those are the 5 guys he would have ended up with. So very interesting to see how this progresses. Really like a second round pick with Malachi Corley, and then was it Tad or Tid or Tip Raymond in the 5th is a non-factor, but those first 6 picks are very intriguing and could end up very very good for him, or could end up very bad for him. So that is what I have as the most intriguing picks. Did you come up with your draft classes?
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I think that you have. I think you have to consider if you want to highlight the class that drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. I think you have to consider that class to be the best. Um, I don't even like. I don't know how the values are aligned, but I would almost, excluding Brock Bowers, I don't even know like I could potentially trade I would potentially trade my whole class for that whole class.
I think Ev would take that. I think if you put this entire class in the trade calculator against this entire class, you're up by like a first round pick plus.
Yeah, but like still I think that like it's still like even though Brock Bowers I landed Brock Bowers, I think that you have to kind of think about I think you have to consider the league breaking potential of Marvin Harrison and so I feel like I should just honorably tip my hat to the team with the 101. Um, but yeah, my draft class is probably I mean Brock Bowers made like the thing that's like great about my class. I don't want to talk about myself, but it's like we've talked about my class and we haven't even mentioned Malik Neighbors. Like that name hasn't even come up at all. And I had and that was and like that was the other highlight of my draft. So um but yeah, then enough about me. I think that the worst class I agree with you that the worst class was Porcino. Um, you know, love Cody Schrader and all, but yeah, borderline like a non-participant. Like it was like he was it was a It was like it was like non-participation by participation in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think I'm with you on the most intriguing class. I mean, Nate like made some like Nate came away with some interesting players with those five firsts. But what he was able to accomplish was he potentially, I mean, the stack that he I don't think we've talked about how the stack potential that he's created. Um I like like we've talked about how Caleb Williams might not be a great fantasy QB, but more a better real life QB. He very well could be a great fantasy QB as well.
Very
And
much so. Yes. He has the traits that we've seen that Mahomes has in the pros. Maybe like we didn't identify that as traits he had coming into the draft, but what Mahomes is able to do on the football field, Caleb showed a lot of that in college, and it's really impressive. So I do think it's more likely that he puts up fantasy points, but there's a possibility that his game just doesn't translate to the fantasy points. So that's why I called that out. But I completely agree. This stack right here is something special. Um, but if I can direct you here, this is your draft class on the right. With less picks, Ev did, put up a fight. But even with this 4,400 value adjustment, you're still, uh, edging him by nearly 2,000 points.
but it does go to show that like you know I came away with a haul, but like I think it just shows it really just illustrates the pull that Marvin Harrison has.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Just an incredible draft. I do think Ev, ending up with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jaden Daniels. I'm not a big fan of Lad McConkey, but I do think he did well in his draft. Just he shore up that QB room a little bit. That's a little bit scary. No help in this running back room, which is lacking to say the least. But we'll see how it progresses. But yeah, thank you for joining me today on this draft breakdown. Any predictions on the Wolves? Wolves in,
Wolves in four.
Wolves in four, and then who do you think we got in the next round?
I think we're destined to face the Thunder.
How do you think we match up?
Which is funny because I think that the Mavs scare me more than the Thunder. Um, I think we I think that the Mavs give us a lot of trouble.
If there's two ball handlers that I think can deal with the ferocity that Ant, Na, and Jaden bring on the defensive end, it
Kyrie
is
Irving.
Kyrie and Luca. Luca just because of his strength, and Kyrie just because of the bag that he has. Those two guys, I do agree, have the capability of breaking down our defense. The Thunder do not scare me in the slightest. Um, and I really think that I think it's us versus Boston, or maybe us versus the Knicks if Boston chokes. I think that this is the closest we'll get to a championship window as we've gotten in our lifetime as Minnesota sports fans, and it is incredible.
Here's my here's my ticket. I've got the Wolves at plus 2,500 to win it all.
How much you put down?
$30.
I
Should have put down
in
plus 20.
February, uh, when we were in Arizona, I put $10 for the Wolves to win the conference. At, I think plus 900, and then $10 to win it all at plus 2,500. Yeah, so plus 850 to win the conference, and plus 2,500 to win it all. So we got a similar bet there. You got a
That's
little
right.
more riding on it. All
Can't wait
right.
to hopefully this goes in a frame. All right.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today, Joe. Uh, let's go Wolves.
The Wolves.